Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar addressing asset data challenges facing the utilities industry today. I'm Katie Mowry, Marketing Manager at Utopia Global, and will be the facilitator for this session. If at any point during the webinar you have a question, please enter it into the question box in the side panel. We'll answer as many questions as time allows today, and we'll follow up with you directly via email to answer any additional questions. Today's webinar will be recorded and available in the resources section of our website at utopiainc.com. Today's presenter is Peter Inslee Hartwell, Chief Technology Officer for Utopia Global. Peter is known for his specialization in maintenance and supply chain operations while using SAP to enable best practices in these areas. He strongly believes that accurate asset data forms the basis of what is needed to ensure you get the most out of the assets you have in your organization. He's written multiple articles and presented all over the world at conferences on topics spanning data migration, governance, enterprise asset management, and more. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Peter.
Thank you very much, Katie, and welcome everyone to the webinar. The agenda that we're going to talk about today is around the asset challenges that face utilities companies globally, and we'll do a little bit of a talk about the various aspects of that where we can actually help people address those challenges. The agenda we'll go through is a very short introduction to Utopia. We'll talk about some of the challenges that you face, the business case, and also the solutions that are available. So very quickly about Utopia. Utopia is an organization that focuses on data. We founded in 2003, and we focus on everything around data. Our overall approach is around the building of the foundation and fixing our data, doing the data remediation, and then finally the sustain, which is where we actually help organizations ensure that any gains that they get in place from doing the build and the fix are sustainable throughout the life cycle of their assets. We are one of 25 solution extension partners, and we actually have developed the SAP MDG governance for retail and for EAM, and one of the only development partners for SAP MDG. So with that, we'll move on to talking about some of the challenges. One of the things that we've looked at is for industries like utilities and other asset-intensive industries, there are a number of areas where asset master data quality has a huge impact on the operations. And you can see some of these listed here, where we're talking about capital projects, where there's $1 million per day or per $1 billion in asset value that is attributed to information handover. The cost of information creation during these capital projects estimated between 1% and 3%. There's a whole raft of shop floor productivity measures as well around wrench time, where the average wrench time in these organizations is around 35%. World class is as high as 60%, and you can get up to a 50% improvement. So the sorts of things that we're going to talk about today are around the information foundation creation, around the capital project information handover, what you can do to actually help improve wrench time by making sure that your systems and the information in your different systems are synchronized, and also what can be done to actually address the issue of the aging and mobile workforce. So the issues that we're going to talk about is how do we get the information we need from all our construction contractors. We'll talk about that from our EPC handover process. Also, how do we ensure that the virtual and physical twins that we have in the plant and in our systems remain in sync. We all have multiple systems in our organizations that have different data about the same object, and oftentimes there's a set of that data that is common. How do you keep that information synchronized? And then finally, how do we gather all that personal knowledge that our workforce has, that they have in their little black books hidden in their lockers that they use every day? How do we convert that personal knowledge over into knowledge that the corporation can use, and that those best practices can be utilized across the organization? There's a lot of money being spent in the utilities industry. In 2016, there was over $117 billion spent on capital spending on adding assets to the networks and the infrastructure within the US. A lot of 44 billion of that was spent just on upgrading the infrastructure, upgrading transmission and distribution systems, modernizing the grid, etc. And the electric power research estimates that between 17 and 24 billion is going to be needed annually all the way through to 2030 just to fully deploy the smart grid technologies. Also, a lot of expenditure that was done around in the generation area, over $40 billion spent switching fuels for some of the generation plants, retiring older coal plants, etc. And around 23 billion spent on gas distribution system upgrades. Now, that equates to a lot of new assets being added to the networks, assets that have information that need to be put into the ERP systems, into the maintenance management systems, so that these assets can be maintained accurately and effectively throughout their life cycle. And the process that goes through that is around where does all this information come from? How do you get it into your systems? And this information comes from multiple places. It can come from the EPCs and the contractors, where you get drawings, you get a whole dump of information that come in that go through the transmittals. These can then be put into data collection forms. They can then be used in what's called the asset staging area, where you can apply the rules that you've decided you need in your business to that information before it actually goes into your system. You can then give feedback back to your EPCs and contractors and say, hey guys, we need this additional information. You can also get information from manufacturers and OEMs. This is where they have provided information about the equipment that was supplied to the contractors and being installed in your plant. So you can actually use that information as well. And SAP has provided what they call the Asset Intelligence Network, which is a cloud-based repository where all of this common information can actually be placed so that you only have to have access to it once. So if multiple contractors are using the same suppliers, then you only need to have that information available once, and you're not looking at multiple sources of information for the same item. You can also have third-party libraries where other people like vendors, distributors are providing information around equipment that was provided and got installed in your plant. So this can also go through the Asset Intelligence Network. You can also have other third-party data suppliers that provide information that has been collected about equipment. So providers that provide best practices maintenance plans, for instance, best practices task lists. These can also go through this and all end up in the same place, which will go through the Asset Intelligence Network and get into the Asset Information Workbench. Once you have that information in the Asset Information Workbench, then you can actually apply your own best practices libraries. These are libraries where you have decided what you want your maintenance plans and task lists to look like. What are the structures? What are the business rules that you're going to apply? And then by using those best practices libraries, you can take that generic information that you've acquired through the Asset Intelligence Network, through these various sources, and combine that in together until you have what's called the MOCA, the Mixed Object Change Request. This can then get used to review what the structure is going to look like before you put it into your SAP system. You can apply the governance rules and the workflows so it can go through the appropriate approval stages, and you're having the right people within your organization review this information before it actually goes into your systems. And it can actually go into multiple systems. It can go into your plant maintenance system. It can go into your content management system. It can also be fed into systems like your reliability or your GIS or your SCADA and engineering systems as well. And one of the important parts is then to make sure that you have the feedback loop, especially from systems like GIS, where you have information stored about these equipments where people find or add additional information that you then want to be also incorporated back into the overall information that you're storing around these equipments. This is such a big topic that on the 18th of July this year, Utopia actually ran a webinar specifically around this process. So if you want to get more detail on how this process works, please feel free to visit our website, and you can download the webinar around capital project handover and the challenges. So this is, what does this process actually look like when you put it into a system? It starts by having a model. So this is a model of a new electric station. You can see that it actually has a function location and equipment hierarchy. It has measurement points set up. It has a task list included. So this is what you would actually set up as your best practices model for what a new electric station looks like. You can then copy that and create a instance of this model, and this is what you're going to put out into your SAP system, and this will have all of the information that you've collected from those various sources included in it. And it's very simple. You simply change the top level in this hierarchy, and all of the changes then propagate down through the hierarchy, rather than you having to go and change or create each of these individual function locations and equipment records manually. Once you've done that, you can put that into a mocker, and you'll actually see that this mocker or mixed object change request actually has the combination, the function location, the equipment, the measurement point, the task list, the maintenance plan, all in one change request. So instead of managing those like you do in the normal system as individual objects or individual domains, within the mocker you can actually manage the combination of these items as an object. And you can actually put the whole combination through a combined workflow. So when you go and submit it, it will go and it will send this information to the appropriate people within the workflow for the relevant approvals. When all of the approvals are gathered, then it will actually come back together and say, okay, now this structure is ready to be put out into your SAP system. So here you can see this whole structure has been pushed out into SAP. It's been created. It's got the equipment in it. It's got the task lists in it. You can add bombs and so on. So by using this approach, you can make sure that when you create your new assets, when that billions of dollars are being spent creating new assets, you're transferring the information that you need to maintain those assets into your SAP system in a manner that enables you to ensure consistency across the various areas of your operation, and that your plant and your plant in SAP and your plant out in the physical world are now aligned and matched. One of the issues you have in this area, though, is that this information not only exists in your plant maintenance system, it also exists out in your GIS, out in your engineering reliability SCADA systems. So you have a whole set of data that is in your plant maintenance system. You have another set of data is out in these systems. And you also have content. You also have unstructured content. You have documents and so on that also need to be managed and aligned and synchronized as this information gets updated. And one of the important parts of this is to make sure that if any one of these issues, any one of these systems changes the data, that the other two systems actually get synchronized with the updated data. So what I'll do now is I'll give you some examples of how you can keep the structured and unstructured content between the plant maintenance system and your enterprise content management system aligned. And also we'll have a quick look at how you could keep information from a GIS system aligned with your data in the plant maintenance system as well. So what we've done as far as this is concerned is that we've actually put in an extension within the MDG screens where you can actually include unstructured content. So this can be content that you pull in from AIN. It can be content that you've already got sitting in a document management system. It can be content that you've received from manufacturers and so on. So the advantage of this is to actually add this unstructured content into the change request when you are creating the equipment in the first place, when you're creating the function location in the first place. So now it's a combination of structured data and unstructured data being managed together in the same workflow, in the same approval steps. So as you go through the process, you can actually view what changes have been made. So if you've got different versions of the documents, you can actually see what versions are being used, how many versions you've had of those documents. And as you go through and process it, you actually are now adding these documents in, attaching it to the information that's going into the SAP system, and it's all going through the same approval process. This ensures that there's synchronization between the unstructured content that's being provided and the structured content that's actually going in and being entered as well. And you can even put rules in that allow you to say, hey, if it's this type of equipment, if it's a safety critical piece of equipment, then you must have certain documents attached. You must have an instruction set. You must have an MSDS sheet attached. Those sorts of things where you can actually put rules around what sort of documents need to be attached for certain types of equipment. If you look at the GIS integration, this can also be achieved as well by making sure that you have the integration and seamless integration between the GIS system and the system where you're keeping your plant maintenance data. So in this particular case, we have a map. The GIS system allows you to click on the certain active equipment that's listed there, and you can bring up the information about that equipment from your plant maintenance system. Once you've actually identified that possibly, say for instance, that the model number or the manufacturer number for this particular piece of equipment is different to what's being recorded in the system, it's a simple matter of clicking on the button and saying, okay, I need to change or update this equipment. It will fire up a nice simple screen. In this case, it's an SAP Fiori screen where you get the opportunity to actually say, hey, I found something that needs to be updated on this particular piece of equipment. It's not the big complicated SAP screen. It's a nice simple screen that people out in the field find easy to use. They can hop in then and they can update and say, okay, why am I changing it? What should the real information be? And you can see that they've actually added these fields in here and gone and updated that. And then once you go and submit it, what it does is it goes and triggers the MDG for EAM, triggers a change request, and it goes through the approval processes. And this can be important because, for instance, in this case, when we've changed the manufacturer and changed the model number, then we should also be updating the bills of material, because whilst it was a different piece of equipment, now that we know that it's a Siemens one versus a Peter piece of equipment as it was last time, now we need to go and update bills of materials, for instance. We may need to go and update maintenance plans or task lists as well. So by putting it through this approval process, you can ensure that when a change like this is made, that all of the actual follow-up actions, all the actual additional changes that you need to make to your asset data gets done, as well as just the simple change of changing the manufacturer and model number. And then when you come back into the GIS system, once you've processed that change request, you can see now that the actual information being displayed in the GIS system has been updated with the information that was processed through the change request. So that's one of the ways that you can keep these different systems of information synchronized, making sure that you have the processes in place where when you find a change that needs to be made, that you make it easy for people to identify what changes need to be made, but then that it goes through an appropriate approval process to ensure that all of the changes that need to be made as a result of that change in data are also made, and that the other systems get that appropriate information, and then maybe you need to attach different documents, for instance, which you could then do in the change request. So that's how you keep these different systems synchronized. One of the other issues facing the utilities industry right now as well is that there is an aging workforce and a very mobile workforce, where people are deciding to change careers, they're retiring, but they've got a history of knowledge in their organization. They've built up a history of best practices. They've got this whole wealth of information that they've been collecting. And unfortunately, that information hasn't necessarily made it across into the corporate systems. Using systems like this, where you can set up these best practices models, where you can actually make sure that the function, location, and equipment hierarchies are set up the same way for equipment of the same type or function locations of the same type, where the structure is consistent, where you've actually decided which measurement points, for instance, are needed for the preventative maintenance, and that's been set up consistently across the equipment, where you've put the task lists in so that you're sure that all of the tests that you need to do, all of the correct safety procedures are included in each of the task lists. That's important. And putting the maintenance plans. Am I doing this stuff once a month, once every 3 months, etc.? And let's be consistent about that. The workforce, the people out in the workforce have gained that knowledge. What we need to do then is take that and get it out of their heads, get it away from their little black books sitting in their lockers, and get it incorporated into a organizational best practices library that can be then reused every time you go and create all of these function locations and equipments across the organization. And the best way to do that is for them to understand that that knowledge is important, that it actually adds value, and now that it can be put somewhere where it can be reused across the organization. So these best practices models that you can use in this process go a long way to converting that personal knowledge over into corporate knowledge. And if you have a look at the way SAP is approaching that right now, their overall architecture for asset information management is a combination of applications that they're providing. As I said, it uses the SAP S/4HANA or the SAP ERP system as their EAM management system. That is integrated then with the SAP Asset Intelligence Network. And it's actually using a whole suite of tools under that, the SAP Data Services, the SAP Master Data Governance EAM extension by Utopia, the SAP Extended Enterprise Content Management by OpenText, as well as specific SAP solutions like SAP Information Steward, Visual Enterprise. And it's all being joined together, integrated, using the SAP Asset Information Workbench by Utopia, which is planned for release later this year. It's available from Utopia now, but will be coming out from SAP before the end of the year. So if we have a look at overall what we're doing, is that the effective and efficient asset information management is key to utilities operations. We spend a lot of money building our infrastructure. We spend a lot of money maintaining our infrastructure. We get asked a lot of questions about how well you're spending the money that you've been given on maintaining these. By putting this information into the system, by using a standard set of models, by making sure that you've got maintenance plans that are common across the same types of equipment, you're able to answer the questions that often get asked by regulators and by customers as well, who are looking for availability, reliability from our networks. So the key aspects to getting that is getting the information in the system early, making sure that as soon as the asset is created, that we actually collect that information and we get it into the system. And then also making sure that once we've got it into the system and we've got it into these multiple systems, that we actually keep that information synchronized, that we have a way of making sure that a change in one is reflected in the others. And finally, by incorporating the best practices into the models that we're using when we're creating this data, that ensures the consistency across the organization, and that we don't have, and that the centers of excellence that we've developed in our organizations, the lessons learned by those people can then be utilized and incorporated across our organization and lift our game enterprise-wide. And I think the final thing is that SAP and Utopia do actually offer a set of solutions that enable you to do that. It's a combination of things. It's the Asset Information Workbench. It's the SAP MDG for EAM solution extension by Utopia. It is the SAP Plant Maintenance system. in addition to the Asset Intelligence Network and the SAP Extended ECM by OpenText. Just quickly, some of this information that I've provided in the webinar today came from a number of sources. You can see the references where this information has been pulled from. And with that, I will hand it back to Katie.
Thanks, Peter. I'd like to jump in with a few questions. So the first question is, my company deals with a lot of unstructured data and documents. Is this a barrier to achieve total connectivity between our systems?
Thanks, Katie. It's not a barrier to actually achieve the connectivity between the systems. In fact, we've set the system up to ensure that you have one process for actually creating, attaching, synchronizing, and approving both the structured and unstructured content that you have within your organization. In the past, these are always done as separate streams. You had one workflow that approved the documents, you had one workflow that approved the structured content, and it was only when they got joined together at the end that you actually had a look at it and you were able to say, oh, the information that's in the unstructured stuff doesn't match what I've actually entered into my structured thing. What we've done now is by joining them together into the same change request, into the same approval workflow, you now get to make sure that that information is consistent before it ends up in your SAP system.
Okay, we have another question. What would you say to a company who isn't sure making an investment in moving to a more digital ecosystem to manage their asset data is worth it?
I think in this day and age, there's a lot of things going on within the industry. One of the biggest things that's happening, especially in the utilities industry, is this whole Internet of Things, where we have this connectivity out to the various equipment that we have running in our networks. One of the important things to make that effective is to make sure that you actually know what it is that you're getting connected to your system. When people go down the path of doing predictive maintenance, where they're actually collecting all this information, it's very important to know that they're actually comparing information between equipment of the same type, of the same manufacturer, from the same of the same model. So that's why having accurate master data about the assets that we have out in our organizations is so important. When you actually get to collect that data, collecting the data is then the first step in that. And the processes that we've talked about today allow you to actually get that information into your system so you can do all of these more advanced aspects like predictive maintenance, like setting up the connectivity to the various assets and so on. So at the end of the day, if you're going down this digitalization path, then the first step in that is getting accurate master data about the assets that you have in your network, and then keeping them updated and accurate throughout the life cycle of the assets.
It looks like we are just about out of time. If you have any additional questions or comments following today's webinar, please email me at the address on the screen. We also hope that you will visit us at SAP for Utilities this September 10th through the 13th in Huntington Beach, California. As always, all of the webinar recordings will be available on our website in the resources section at utopiainc.com. We thank you for joining today.